A woman just tossed a whole sack of fine salt into her cooking, and the emperor instantly marked her as a time traveler. She was butchered and dumped into a watery pit, left there until the life completely drained out of her. Then the emperor ordered me, a lowly maid from the cold palace, to bury her. And honestly, I didn't bat an eye. I just grabbed a shovel and started digging. Why? Because over the past 3 years, I've buried 99 time-traveling girls just like her. They were exactly like me. We all wanted the queen's phoenix seal just to survive. The eunuch working next to me wiped his sweat, flashed a sly smile, and said, "Auntie Sicken. Do you reckon there are any more time travelers hiding in the palace?" The question felt like a trap. I wasn't about to take the bait. After all, in the 3 years since I crossed over, 99 time travelers had already met their end in this palace. Without a change in my expression, I tossed the last shovelful of dirt over the grave, shot him a dark look, and snapped. "Focus on your work. Keep your nose out of things that don't concern you. That is, if you want to keep that head attached to your neck." From the very beginning, I forced myself to blend in perfectly as a local. I kept my mouth shut and watched everything I didn't understand. I never, ever showed an ounce of intelligence or behavior that didn't fit a lowly maid. "You're absolutely right, Auntie. I was just a bit curious, that's all." A few days ago, the head eunuch was out hunting for more time travelers again. Makes you wonder who's going to die next. I kept my mouth shut, but quickened my pace, to flush out time travelers. The palace had pulled every trick in the book. At first, those girls all thought they were the chosen ones, believing they were brought here to live a fairy tale romance with the emperor. But whether they were reciting ancient poetry to show off, or accidentally blurting out modern math formulas, some even went as far as inventing high-explosive gunpowder, the emperor would act absolutely thrilled, offering them 10,000 taels of gold on the spot. But my fellow moderners showed their hands way too fast. They'd open their mouths and demand the phoenix seal. The emperor was incredibly paranoid, but he'd pretend to dote on them. To me, it was obvious. He was just locking them in a golden cage to squeeze every last drop of value out of them. I thought about running away once, too. But the 49th time traveler tested that theory for me, when she got caught, since she didn't have any special skills, and could only offer the same modern knowledge the previous girls had already given. She was sentenced to be beaten to death. That day, every off-duty maid and eunuch was forced to gather in the square and watch the execution. By the time she finally stopped breathing, she was nothing but a mangled sack of shattered bones and bloody flesh. That was the moment I realized that everyone in this palace is constantly watching each other. We were all tied together by guilt by association. If anyone acted even slightly out of the ordinary, failing to report them was an automatic death sentence. Little Lou, the eunuch assigned to me, was the one chained to my fate. I never knew if he was actively testing me or genuinely just curious. After getting back, I went right back to serving meals to the disgraced concubines in the cold palace. Thanks to all the modern knowledge from those dead girls over the past 3 years, the cooking tools in the palace had gotten a massive upgrade, but I made damn sure to hide my modern cooking skills. Every single time, I just hacked up the raw ingredients, threw them into a pot, and boiled them to mush. Then I'd scoop it into bowls and serve it. Little Lou would always joke that my cooking looked exactly like the pig slop back at his farm. But I didn't care. I just stuck to the palace rules, surviving this exact same monotonous routine for 3 years. Today, just as I stepped out from delivering meals, one of the head eunuch's personal attendants marched right up to me. I quickly slapped on my most pathetic, groveling smile, bowing so low my head almost touched my knees. "Greetings, Eunuch Zhang. Thank you for your hard work. What brings you to the cold palace? It's been way too quiet around here lately." The head eunuch told us to look around, see if there's anything new going on. What could possibly be new in the cold palace? We just eat and sleep and eat. Nothing but the crazy women singing inside every day. Just then, Eunuch Yang's robe brushed right past me. He was heading straight for my room. I watched him push the door open and walk right in. My palms were dripping with cold sweat. Because, to blend in and not get noticed, I had secretly set up a feng shui layout in my room. "Madam Sicken, this room is quite interesting. The layout is totally different from the other servants. The plants outside are all dead in this winter cold, yet your orchid is in full bloom. Truly remarkable." Hearing those words, my heart skipped a beat. A time-traveling girl had already recommended greenhouse veggies to the emperor before. Was he suspicious of my feng shui-grown orchid? "It's just because I burn charcoal at night, making the room nice and warm. Plus, the window faces east, so the flower gets plenty of sun," I quickly replied. Eunuch Zhang just stared at me, but didn't say a word. In the end, he took a walk around the other servants' rooms in the cold palace too. He inspected everything. Once Eunuch Zhang and the 2 little eunuchs with him casually left, my heart was still in my throat, ready to jump out of my chest. But just as I stood up straight, Eunuch Yang's errand boy came right back. He specifically asked for the orchid from my room. He carried it away before I could even nod. Damn it, my birth chart was hidden in that pot. I didn't dare to go after him at all. My throat felt terribly dry and itchy, and I coughed several times in a row. Madam Sicken, you're shivering. Did you catch a chill from the wind while digging that grave yesterday? Little Six helped me lie down, but my whole body started shaking uncontrollably. I didn't know if I was just terrified or if I had actually caught a bad cold. That night, I had a nightmare. I dreamed that I was the maid being beaten to death. Every single bone in my body ached unbearably. When I woke up, the room was dead silent. The spot where my orchid used to sit was completely empty. Little Six wasn't around at this hour either. I had no idea where he went. I threw on my coat and opened the door, only to find the cold palace unusually quiet. Right then, Little Six came rushing back in a hurry. Madam, why are you standing outside? Be careful not to catch a draft and get worse. He came over to support me, but I caught a faint, strange odor on him. It smelled like vomit, and mixed with the stench of blood. Where have you been? Why do you smell so weird? Little Six helped me sit down. His forced calm instantly vanished, his face turning stiff. His hands just hovered in the air, completely at a loss. He's 5 or 6 years younger than me. The last time I saw him this terrified was when we were burying that dead body together. Madam, the ladies in the cold palace, they're all gone. Every single one of them. A deep, sickening sense of dread washed over me. In this palace, women can never leave for their entire lives. Unless they die. I asked him what happened. Little Six said it was an absolute decree from the emperor. So that smell on him was the stench of blood and vomit from those poor concubines after they drank the poisoned wine. No wonder the cold palace was so quiet tonight. There wasn't even a single scream. Go take a bath, I told him. Wash all this awful bad luck away. I hand over a handkerchief, letting little Lou wipe away his tears. Those noble ladies used to be our companions here, so we naturally grew attached to them. Now there is no one left to serve in the cold palace, so the two of us are going to be reassigned. Who knows where we will end up? I stay silent, just shooing him away to go wash up quickly. While I am at it, I slightly shift the feng shui arrangements in the room. It looks like the higher-ups are already suspicious of me. The next day, right at the crack of dawn, 4 or 5 eunuchs show up at the cold palace. They say Eunuch Zhang feels bad for me and little Lou, thinking that burying so many people is just too exhausting, so he sent them to help. Those discarded concubines are wrapped in straw mats, piled up layer upon layer on the wooden cart. In the past, I would have thrown up. But now, just popping a piece of candied dried ginger into my mouth is enough to keep it down. Once we reach the mass grave, little Lou asks me how we should dig this plot. Because he knows I like to use a compass to read feng shui, he just stands to the side and waits. I cast a glance at the eunuchs who tagged along and say in a cold tone, just dig a big pit and bury them. They were never favored when they were alive. So do you really expect them to have some good resting place in death? Little Lou freezes for a second, but quickly nods and calls them over to dig the pit. Usually, I would clean up the bodies, and then figure out the proper direction for them. But today, these people will not allow me to show any kindness. Only by acting bitter and mean can I blend in with the true nature of people in the inner palace. Those time-traveling girls are all so lively and kind-hearted, coming from the best of eras. Some of them have not even killed a chicken before. Their pure, innocent stupidity is on full display. The cart tips over, and the bodies tumble haphazardly into the pit. Because rigor mortis has already set in, some of the bodies have their hands raised high in the air, as if they are trying to grab onto something. I swing my shovel, and help the other eunuchs fill in the dirt. Soon, my aching body is dripping with sweat again. I turn around and barely take 2 steps before my vision goes black. Losing my balance, I collapse onto the grass. After being hauled onto the cart by a few eunuchs, I am already in a total daze. When I finally wake up again, I find myself in a new room. Although the bedding is still mine, the furnishings in this room are clearly much nicer than anywhere else. Plus, all those little feng shui trinkets I kept in my room are now just tossed into a pile in the corner. My feng shui array meant to hide from the emperor has been destroyed. The answer is glaringly obvious. Auntie, you are finally awake. When you were burning up and delirious, you mumbled, 3 times 6 is 18, 9 times 9 is 81. The one who walks in is a young palace maid. She looks unfamiliar, but even though she is wearing a gentle smile, and looks completely innocent, I go on high alert, bracing myself to deal with her. When you were sick and burning up with a fever, I guess even I do not know what nonsense I was spouting. I know you were reciting the multiplication table. I have heard the noble ladies say it before. Are you trying to say I am a time traveler? Well, are you? Time-traveling girls are born to be masters. If I actually had that kind of status, would I still be stuck in this cold palace for so many years? Please calm down, Auntie. I was just guessing. I have not gone around gossiping about it to anyone. I let out a long sigh of relief. Thank goodness it was just the multiplication table. This thing has been around for thousands of years. I can easily bluff my way out of it with a few words. I tell her, do not spout such nonsense in the future. We palace servants just do not have the destiny to be masters. The moment those words leave my mouth, Eunuch Zhang is already chuckling outside, and in the blink of an eye, he appears right inside the room. You're so lucky, Gugu. The emperor took a fancy to your orchid, and wants you to go receive your reward. But before I could even get it, the maids nearby immediately started dressing me. Looks like I can't dodge this one today. My legs felt like lead as I walked toward the Yuqing palace. When I looked up at the steps, I could almost see my death countdown ticking away. The moment I stepped into the grand hall, my heart started pounding wildly. Your humble servant, Si Qin, greets your majesty. Raise your head, let me look at you. The emperor's voice sounded like a death curse. I clearly saw the death countdown flashing right in front of my eyes. As much as I wanted to curse him out, I kept my eyes fixed on the floor, not daring to look straight at him. I heard you can recite the multiplication tables. His tone was absolutely certain. Looks like someone had already snitched on me. I wasn't going to hide it, so I told him my father was a feng shui master. And he had taught me a few tricks before I entered the palace. Suddenly, he grabbed my chin and forced my head up. Our eyes met. No wonder all those other time travelers threw themselves at him. The emperor was actually drop-dead gorgeous. Then, do you know what an airplane is? Is it a flying pheasant, your majesty? He let out a cold sneer, terrifying me into dropping my head back to the floor, cowering exactly like any other maid would. Seeing this, he burst into laughter. A few days ago, he told me, I acquired something called a system. It told me that if I kill off every single time-traveling woman, my empire will thrive for all eternity. What do you think about that? I couldn't believe it. The emperor had a system too. Forcing down my shock, I played it cool and immediately started swearing my absolute loyalty to him. Your majesty, I said, heaven always watches over the blessed. Your servant will gladly wipe out these time travelers for you, ensuring peace and prosperity for our great empire. For all eternity. The emperor chuckled again. Looked like my sucking up was working perfectly. But the very next second, he suddenly stepped right behind me, slamming his hand down hard onto my shoulder. Well said, but why'd I see the words, time traveler, hovering right above your head? Well said, but why'd I see the words, time traveler, hovering right above your head? Boom, every single nerve in my brain just snapped. He knew, but how could he possibly know? My disguise was absolutely flawless. Every single word, every little move I made, followed the rules of this era to the letter. In 3 years, I hadn't slipped up even once. Was it that pot of orchids? Are those multiplication tables that little maid overheard? No, the multiplication tables have been around for 1,000 years. That's not hard proof. Then was it the birth chart I buried in that flower pot? Did they use that to track down where I came from? No, that doesn't make sense. If he really had solid proof, I'd be rotting in the torture chambers right now, not standing here in the Yuqing palace. I could feel it. The emperor's piercing gaze was locking onto every tiny twitch of my face. He was testing me. It was an emperor's psychological trap. He didn't have any evidence. He was just bluffing. He might have picked up on a few little clues and gotten suspicious. But he wasn't completely sure. That question was just a massive net cast out by a fisherman, waiting for a paranoid little fish like me to swim right into it. If I admitted it or even defended myself too hard, I'd immediately confirm his suspicions, and my ending would be even worse than the 99th time traveler before me. If I act completely clueless, he might get suspicious that I'm not terrified enough. In a split second, I decided to react exactly how a real, native-born palace maid would, absolutely terrified by the word transmigrator. I threw myself down again, my forehead slamming heavily against the carpet. Mercy, your majesty, this lowly servant is foolish. I don't understand what you mean. Transmigrator is a cursed word in the palace. I only heard whispers of it when burying those noble ladies. I wouldn't even dare to think about such things. How could something like that be floating above my head? There's nothing on my head but my hair and sweat. I would never dare bring anything wicked before your majesty. Please, you have to believe me. Please, spare my miserable life. I pressed my face fiercely into the rug, cowering with every ounce of strength I had, making myself look as pathetic and submissive as possible. This was the very first rule I learned in this flesh-eating imperial harem. And the absolute most important rule for survival. When you don't know the other person's hand, you drop yourself to the dirt, let them walk all over you, and pray you don't get crushed. The great hall fell dead silent. I could feel it, the emperor's piercing gaze still burning right through me. Every second that ticked by felt like agonizing torture in a boiling vat of oil. I don't know how long it lasted. Long enough for my knees to go completely numb, and my forehead to throb from all the rushing blood. Finally, a cryptic, low chuckle broke the silence above me. Guess he bought it. Or at least, my reaction was enough to temporarily satisfy his paranoia. "Look up at me. Tell me, don't you want to be the Empress?" I was forced to stare up into his breathtakingly handsome face. His skin was pale, and his lips were thin. Whenever his face went blank, he looked incredibly, utterly cold-blooded. A man like this was born to rule. He saw human lives as nothing but dirt. Suddenly, the Emperor stepped forward, grabbed me, and yanked me up off the floor. He forced me right into his chest. This sudden, violent intimacy made every single hair on my body stand on end, not out of any romantic thrill, but from the pure, primal terror of a prey caught in the jaws of a beast. And at that exact moment, the data on the transparent, floating screen right in front of my eyes shifted. It read, Emperor's affection level, 1%. I couldn't help but sneer in my mind, but on the outside, tears of sheer panic and terror welled up in my eyes, making me look absolutely pitiful. 1%. This pathetic shred of affection was probably less than the interest he had in a potted orchid. Did the other girls from my world see this exact same number? Did they actually believe that if they just kept raising this stat, they could truly win the Emperor's heart? To trade it for a lifetime of glory, and the Empress's seal that ultimately failed to save their lives? So incredibly naive. The Emperor doesn't have a heart. Or rather, his heart only belongs to his empire and to himself. All he ever wanted was the bizarre knowledge inside a transmigrator's head and their endless, strange abilities. The second he bleeds you dry of your usefulness, he throws you away without a second thought. In the eyes of the king, as souls from another world are nothing more than convenient little tools. The phrase discarding someone once they've outlived their usefulness is practically tailor-made for him. I will never, ever let some tiny, meaningless little data box expose a single ounce of my true feelings. I wouldn't dare. This servant was born to be your majesty's slave. I would never dare overstep. I lowered my eyes, my voice trembling. Every single word dripped with a bone-deep subservience. In my original world, everyone was equal. But this is a feudal dynasty where men rule and imperial power is absolute. So what if I'm from another world? Without any family backing, without any roots or connections, what right do I have to be the Empress? Relying on reciting poems and songs? Or some half-baked scientific knowledge? The 99 girls before me already proved with their blood that it's a dead end. The Emperor seemed quite satisfied with my answer. The fingers pinching my chin loosened slightly, but the arm locked tightly around my waist didn't relax in the slightest. He looked at me like he was admiring an amusing toy, a dark, unreadable gleam in the depths of his eyes. Guards, take her away and keep a close eye on her. Finally, the Emperor let me go. I was ushered into a dead quiet palace pavilion by two burly eunuchs, one on each side. The furnishings inside were incredibly luxurious. Gold, silver, jewels, and jade ornaments. It had absolutely everything. The bed curtains were made of the finest silk brocade, and the blankets were stuffed with warm, soft down. Even the tea set on the table was a brand new masterpiece from the imperial kilns. This place was 1,000 times better than my previous dump in the cold palace. But it felt even more like a gilded cage. The doors and windows were locked tight. Aside from the palace maids delivering my meals, absolutely no one spoke a word to me. Those maids would just drop off the food boxes and hurry away without saying a single extra word. Their eyes were full of fear and distance. On the table, someone had deliberately left behind some paper and a pen. And that pen was actually a fountain pen. A modern object. The barrel was smooth and the nib gleamed with the cold, hard light of metal. I had no idea which fellow time traveler this belonged to before they died, but now, it was bait, sitting there waiting for me to take the hook. I didn't dare touch it. I didn't even dare let my eyes linger on it for more than a second. I knew perfectly well that every single corner of this room could have hidden eyes watching my every move. Every little thing in here was a trap. So, day after day, I just quietly ate and slept. Or sat by the window, peering through the narrow gaps in the lattice, staring blankly at the exact same, unchanging sky outside. Time dragged on, day after day. On the transparent panel hovering right in front of my eyes, the countdown numbers kept ticking away, completely merciless. I could clearly feel the effects of that strange radiation pulsing through my body, growing worse and worse. At first, it was just an occasional numb, tingling pain in my fingertips. Now, it had already spread through my entire hand. I knew that if this kept up, I would end up exactly like the other girls from my world, dying in excruciating agony as my blood literally froze in my veins. Maybe these people also knew about the 99-day countdown. They were deliberately trying to break me like a wild falcon, slowly wearing down my willpower bit by bit, to force me to talk. On the 10th day of my confinement, the head eunuch himself came to see me. He was a slightly plump man, with a pale, beardless face, and he always wore this gentle, smiling expression. But his eyes, they darted around with a sharp, calculating gleam, like they could see straight through a person's soul. Even the usually arrogant eunuch Zhang could only trail respectfully behind him. Bowing and scraping, the second I saw him, I threw myself to the floor, my eyes brimming with a pathetic, groveling terror. I kowtowed frantically, my forehead smacking the ground. Lord Chief Eunuch, this lowly servant is truly not some divine maiden. Please, I beg you to show mercy. Please spare this servant. The head eunuch watched me, as I slammed my head against the cold floor over and over, until my forehead was red and swollen. Only then did he speak, in a slow, drawling voice. Miss Sicken, why put yourself through all this suffering? If you just admit your true identity, you will be crowned in phoenix robes, with endless wealth and glory waiting for you. Here is paper and a brush. Whenever you finally come to your senses, and write down all those modern marvels and brilliant techniques you know, that is when you will be allowed to leave. After he finished, he turned and walked away without looking back. I clearly heard the heavy clunk of the palace doors being locked from the outside. 5 more days passed. My mind and body were pushed to their absolute breaking point. Late into the night, as I tossed and turned, kept awake by the sharp, shooting pains in my hands and feet. The palace doors were pushed open without a sound. A woman wearing a modern, form-fitting dress walked in. Her makeup was absolutely flawless, and her long hair fell in soft curls. The moment she saw me, her face lit up with pure excitement. Girl, you time-traveled here too, didn't you? I was so shocked by this sudden entrance that I shot up from the bed, shrinking back in total confusion. But she closed the distance in a few steps and pulled me into a massive hug. Her grip was surprisingly strong. Oh my god, I finally found my people. I'm a time traveler too. My system gave me a mission to win over the Emperor. What's your affection score at? Come on, let's team up and strategize. We can totally crush this mission together. I just froze in her embrace, my brain working in overdrive. Who is this girl? Is she really from the modern world like me? Or is this just another sick, elaborate trap set by the Emperor? I couldn't risk it. I shoved her away with all my might, scrambling back into the corner of the bed. I wrapped myself tightly in the blanket, staring at her with nothing but sheer terror and defensiveness. I shook my head wildly, acting like I had absolutely no idea what she was talking about. The woman shifted from her initial thrill to just rambling on and on, trying to use all kinds of modern slang to test me, from GOAT to absolutely iconic, and from celebrity drama to viral internet memes, but I just kept my head bowed in total submission, even trembling as I poured her a cup of tea, serving her like a perfectly obedient maid. Do you even know what human equality is? We women are not slaves. She seemed completely triggered by my subservient act, but I just kept my eyes lowered and whispered, you are the divine maiden. This lowly servant cannot comprehend your words. You might be brave enough to say such things, but I certainly wouldn't dare agree. Preaching equality in a place where the Emperor's word is absolute law? She really must have a death wish. This girl, known as Consort Zhao, actually had a rare degree in civil engineering. Right now, she was standing inside the Imperial study, pointing at a massive blueprint, explaining the construction and structural improvements for the river dams to the Emperor. Every word she spoke was dripping with the confidence and sheer expertise of a modern intellectual. She said, Your Majesty, please take a look at this. If we use a stable triangular structure here, and combine it with my new cement formula, it won't just boost the dam's flood resistance by 3 times. It will also cut down the construction time and labor by at least 40%. The Emperor sat back in his dragon throne, listening with immense interest, tossing out a question or two every now and then. His eyes practically sparkled with approval. Meanwhile, I just stood there like all the other maids and eunuchs, waiting outside the doors with my head bowed, acting like a completely emotionless statue. Concubine Zhao's professional knowledge was incredibly solid, but because of the special nature of her major, many of her projects required leaving the palace for on-site field trips. Building a dam naturally takes a massive amount of time. The 99-day strategy period was, to her, a sword of Damocles constantly hanging over her head. To extend her life, and to exploit her talents for as long as possible, the Emperor granted her daily access to the Qilin Pavilion, allowing her to get exceptionally close to the seal, about 3 meters away, and stay there for 2 hours. As long as she stayed within that specific magnetic field for the required time. I could peek through the crack in the door and clearly see the countdown timer floating above her head. Reset back to 99 days. She was a brilliant girl. She knew how to exploit the rules, how to glitch the system. But the Emperor was growing even more cunning. He provided the convenience, yet kept an iron grip on the switch to her survival. This became a silent, high-stakes game of chess between them. I looked at the pot of orchids sitting in the corner of the Emperor's study. They had long withered and died from neglect. Taking advantage of a moment when no one was watching, I carried it away and dumped it in a deserted, ruined courtyard. While pouring out the dirt, I dug out that slip of paper with my birth date and astral characters written on it. It was already blurred, heavily stained by the damp soil. Without a single second of hesitation, I ripped it to shreds, letting the pieces mix into the dust until they vanished completely. After doing all this, it felt like a massive boulder had finally been lifted from my chest. On my way back, some inexplicable impulse possessed me to climb up the highest corner watchtower. The fading glow of the setting sun dyed the entire forbidden city in a magnificent, bloody crimson. I gazed down at the endless palace walls. Inside these high walls lay endless scheming and desperate struggles. Outside them lay the freedom I could never, ever return to. I don't know why, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the feng shui of this palace had become incredibly eerie lately. The once steady, flowing energy felt like it was being violently stirred by some strange outside force. Giving off an indescribable sense of heavy, restless dread, the Emperor started having horrific nightmares. He would jolt awake in the middle of the night, then fly into a terrifying rage, dragging the servants on night watch out for a brutal beating. Naturally, I wasn't spared either. Just because my hand trembled slightly while serving tea, spilling a single drop of water, I was dragged outside and hit with 12 merciless lashes of the cane. The heavy wooden board smashed into my flesh, the pain so agonizing I almost blacked out, but I bit my lip so hard it bled, refusing to let out a single cry of pain. Though it hurt like hell, I couldn't let it delay my duties. The very next day, I still had to drag my battered legs, limping painfully back to serve the Emperor. The Emperor, who had been reviewing memorials, suddenly looked up and asked if it hurt. A violent shudder ran through me. Swallowing the agonizing pain, I frantically dropped to my knees, slamming my forehead hard against the cold floor. Whether thunder or rain, all is your Majesty's divine grace. This servant thanks your Majesty for your profound mercy. I heard the Emperor let out a low, dark chuckle. There wasn't a single shred of warmth in that laugh. Instead, it sent an icy chill straight into my bones. But I didn't dare look up. I could only curl myself up even tighter. The next second, his ice-cold voice rang out, telling me to get the hell out. I didn't dare hesitate for a fraction of a second. I literally rolled out the door, stumbling and scrambling in an utterly pathetic display. As I dragged myself over that tall, hard threshold, just as I struggled to pull myself up from the ground, I saw a man dressed in a modern white shirt and suit pants, slowly walking toward the royal study. He was wearing a pair of dark sunglasses. Even under the dim light of the palace lanterns, he still didn't take them off. The jarring contrast between the sweeping eaves of the ancient palace and the modern clothes on his body left me stunned for a moment. Even though my mind was burning with curiosity, I didn't dare take another look, let alone ask any questions. I could only lower my head and watch him enter. Once inside, all the servants attending to the Emperor were ordered out. Eunuch Zhang brought his men to clear everyone out within 10 zhang of the imperial study. No one was allowed near it, but I knew of a secret spot. I understand feng shui. Years of careful observation have made me know the flow of energy in every corner of this palace like the back of my hand. There's a rock garden behind the imperial study and a hidden crevice in the stones. Points right at the study window. Not only is it perfectly concealed, but through the echoes of the rocks, it carries every word spoken inside crystal clear. I pulled a hollowed-out piece of bamboo from my sleeve to use as a makeshift listening tube, and quietly sneaked over. Without my permission. You've grown awfully bold. Have you forgotten who the true master of this empire is? Do not break my rules. Otherwise, if the next transmigrated woman doesn't show up, I'll have you killed. Only later did I find out that this man was the all-powerful state preceptor, someone even the Emperor was terrified of. He was the one who opened the portal between the two worlds. And it was him who brought those transmigrated women to the Emperor, one after another. This empire's power has skyrocketed in recent years, and it was all thanks to the preceptor's arrival. That very night, Consort Zhao was called to share the Emperor's bed for the first time. As a servant, I had to keep the night watch outside the chamber. The burning pain from my recent flogging made it impossible to sit or stand still, forcing me to pace around just to ease the agony. As I walked, I suddenly noticed a slight shift in the layout of the inner chamber. Thanks to my sharp eye for feng shui, I immediately sensed a cleverly hidden secret passage in the wall right behind the royal bed. The Emperor was supposedly consummating with the transmigrated woman. Muffled, heavy panting drifted from inside the room. Peering through the thin veils and hazy candlelight, I saw a sight I will never forget for the rest of my life. The man rolling between the sheets with Consort Zhao wasn't the Emperor at all. It was the preceptor in his modern clothes. The Emperor, dressed in a plain white nightgown, just sat quietly in a wooden armchair to the side, staring blankly at this twisted, absurd scene. His eyes were completely hollow, like a puppet stripped of its soul. I quickly shrank back, hiding myself in the blind spot of the shifting shadows, and crept to a safer spot to watch. Just as I suspected, a heavily drugged Consort Zhao was intimately entangled with the preceptor. She's pretty good. Make sure you reward her tomorrow. The preceptor barked orders at the emperor as he casually tossed his clothes back on. He bluntly threatened the emperor, if this transmigrated woman didn't get pregnant soon, his time on the throne would be over. I held my breath, and carefully slipped back to my guard post before they could notice anything. I hadn't even caught my breath when I heard the emperor calling for water from inside. I brought the wash basin in. The emperor's hands were long, slender, and freezing cold. He snatched the towel from me, violently and repeatedly scrubbing every single one of his fingers. He glared at the woman lying spent on the bed without a single trace of warmth or emotion. There was nothing but pure, endless disgust and freezing contempt. I silently backed out of the room. The next day, I watched the emperor's every move closely. It seemed the state preceptor really had him by the throat. He obeyed the preceptor's every word, and showered consort Xian with unprecedented favor. Time flew by. The countdown on my mission panel was already halfway gone. The emperor's affection score for me was still stuck at a pitiful 1%. That night, I jolted awake from an agonizing pain in my lower body. The pain felt like countless needles piercing straight into my bone marrow. It had reached the point where I couldn't just grit my teeth and power through it anymore. And right at that moment, joyous news arrived from the Imperial Hospital. Consort Xian was pregnant. It matched the internal affairs bed records perfectly. Inside the Imperial study, the Emperor looked absolutely livid. But Consort Xian was completely clueless, still lost in her fantasy of rising to power through her child. She started dropping hints to the Emperor more and more, eyeing the Empress's phoenix seal. She wanted the throne of the Empress. The Emperor just smiled and agreed to her every request. But the moment she turned her back, I saw it. Eunuch Zhang personally bringing back a packet of poison from the Imperial Hospital. The Emperor had zero intention of letting the preceptor's child inherit his great Yang Empire. Staring at the glaring red numbers on my panel, I carried a freshly brewed cup of ginseng tea into the Imperial study. I was already coughing up blood, barely keeping myself going with the painkillers I'd stashed away. Just to walk and act normally. My face was frighteningly pale too. At this point, I couldn't really hide my identity as a transmigrator anymore. Your Majesty, this servant knows a way to solve your problem. I gently set the ginseng tea on his desk. My voice was quiet, but loud enough to make the Emperor look up from his scrolls. His eyes locked onto me, filled with sharp scrutiny. Right in front of him, I pulled out a blueprint I had prepared from my sleeve. Next time the preceptor comes, please arrange your bedchamber exactly like this, Your Majesty. He will never make it out alive. It was a feng shui trap I had meticulously designed. A phantom maze. The Emperor's bedchamber was massive. Just by slightly shifting a few key pieces of furniture, it would create an endless, looping space. Enough to trap anyone until they died. The Emperor's eyes remained perfectly calm. You couldn't read any emotion on his face. But the affection score on the panel in front of me was skyrocketing like a rocket. Finally, he spoke up. Go set it up, but don't think for a second that I'll show you any mercy. You're just like that preceptor. I just smiled, keeping my mouth shut. After I passed down his orders, Eunuch Zhang immediately mobilized every man he had. They set the bedchamber up perfectly, and I just waited, counting the seconds until the preceptor showed up. He finally came, this time wearing a long black trench coat, and his usual dark sunglasses. I personally led him right into the bedchamber. The Emperor was sitting in his chair, looking as calm as ever. But today, there were no women waiting on the bed for the preceptor. He frowned and turned to glare at me. Where are my women? He demanded, and in the exact second he turned his head, the Emperor and I slipped silently into the safe zone of the array, vanishing from his sight completely. The preceptor realized something was wrong. He tried to walk out, but quickly realized that no matter which way he went, he always ended up right back where he started. The palace lighting was dim, and honestly, the Emperor and I weren't even that far from him. It was just the spatial illusion keeping us completely hidden from his view. Emperor, you want to get rid of me? But don't you forget, I was the one who put you on that throne. I helped you use the transmigrated women's knowledge to stabilize your kingdom. If I hadn't opened the transmigration portal for you, you would never have become the Emperor. The Imperial preceptor frantically tried to smash the furnishings in the room to break the array, but I had already planned for that. All the key points of the formation were anchored with the heaviest artifacts. There was no way he could move them all by himself. He was already a fly caught in my web. In his frantic rage, the preceptor blurted out countless royal secrets. His eyes were just burning with pure, concentrated hatred. I respectfully asked His Majesty to leave the room. Being trapped in there without food or water for 10 days, he was definitely going to die. I lay in the new bedchamber bestowed by the Emperor, but even the softest mattress couldn't ease the bone-piercing agony tearing through my body. I looked at the Emperor and gasped. Your Majesty, I am dying. Could you please let me choose my own auspicious resting place? Do you not wish to be the Empress? I weakly shook my head. Forcing a bitter smile, I knew, this was my final gamble. I told him that rather than being his empress, I yearned for freedom. He stared at me intently, as if trying to judge whether I was lying. After a long pause, he slowly nodded, allowing me to find my own burial site. I had little Lou carry me to the mass grave, the exact spot I had personally marked. All around me lay the graves of 99 fellow transmigrators, and the preceptor's corpse had been buried exactly where I instructed. 100 spots of absolute yin energy, plus the preceptor's powerful, otherworldly soul acting as the formation's core. My constellation life extension array was finally complete. As I lay down in the coffin I had prepared, I could feel a faint warmth seeping up from deep underground, wrapping around my entire body. I was gambling that this magnetic field I had created through feng shui and mysticism could cancel out the radiation and keep me alive. But I was also betting on something else. I bet that the Emperor, facing a bizarre woman who managed to kill the preceptor, would still have enough curiosity about me. On the transparent holographic panel right in front of me, the system's countdown finally stopped at 1 day. The Emperor's men had come for me after all. They carried me, coffin and all, straight back to the palace and placed me directly in the Qilin Pavilion, where the royal seal was kept. I was barely 2 meters away from that seal. Almost instantly, my agonizing pain faded away, and my system's survival countdown, the moment I got close to that seal, reset completely back to 99 days. The Emperor then asked me what I truly desired. He wanted to officially reward me for my services. Looking at the bright numbers on my panel, I forced down the overwhelming, absolute desperation screaming in my heart. Just when the Emperor thought I would beg for the Empress's throne like all the others, I asked to leave the palace. You see, the heart of a monarch. He can choose to give it to you, but you are never allowed to ask for it. The 99 transmigrators before me, they all died because they were just too impatient. They never gave the Emperor enough room to enjoy his absolute control. That thrilling cat-and-mouse game of hunting his prey. So, my unexpected choice clearly caught him off guard and sparked a fresh wave of interest. Sicken, do you have any idea how many women in this palace would gladly bleed just to climb their way to the top? Yet you want to walk away? Your Majesty, my life is as worthless as weeds. I am not blessed by fate. I simply cannot bear the weight of such heaven-defying wealth. The world outside these walls might not be grand, but it is the only place where I can see a way to simply survive. I boldly beg your Majesty, please let me go. I humbled myself as much as I possibly could, but he just fell silent again. This time, the silence lasted even longer. And what if I do not allow it? The affection score went up again. I choked back my tears and said, whether punishment or reward, all is your Majesty's grace. If your Majesty forbids it, then this servant will stay and continue serving you. Until the day I die of old age in this palace, I will not complain. He stared at me for the longest time, until finally, he let go of my hand. He turned and walked toward the Empress's seal on the high platform. You may leave, but before you go, do one last thing for me. Next, I was taken to the Imperial Observatory. This is the royal facility in charge of astronomy, the calendar, and feng shui. Normally, apart from specific officials, not even the head eunuch is allowed to just stroll in. But the task the Emperor gave me was to establish an anomaly department right here. Eunuch Zhang personally guided me through layers of heavily guarded courtyards, arriving at a detached little building deep within the observatory. Madam Si Chin, from now on, you are the head of the Department of Anomalies. His Majesty has decreed, should any more otherworldly people appear in the palace, they are entirely yours to deal with. All the files and manpower in the observatory are at your full disposal. Deep down, I knew exactly what this meant. He still wasn't willing to let me go. He took me from being a suspected time-traveling girl and completely flipped the script, making me the manager of time-traveling girls. Oh, the absolute irony of it all. What a terrifyingly brilliant piece of imperial manipulation. He deliberately put me in the one position that understands these girls the most, forcing me to use my specialized knowledge to hunt down my own kind. This was both exploitation and surveillance. As long as there was even one time traveler left in this palace, I could forget about ever truly leaving. I looked at Eunuch Zhang and replied, this servant accepts the decree. Eunuch Zhang nodded with a satisfied smile. Then, he took a red sandalwood tray from the young eunuch standing behind him. Resting on it was a compact, dark iron token. Engraved upon it was an ancient character for anomaly. He told me this was my command token. With this in hand, anywhere within the palace walls, except for the Emperor's private bedchambers and the restricted Qilin Pavilion, I had free reign. I reached out, and accepted that heavy, cold piece of iron. And so, I settled into the observatory's Department of Anomalies. Little Six was transferred over as well, becoming the only person under my command that I could actually trust. He looked around the quiet, elegant courtyard. his face lighting up with absolute disbelief and joy. "Madam, we've finally made it through the worst." I didn't say a word in response. I merely walked over to the window and pushed open the carved wooden frame. Right outside stood the observatory's towering stargazing platform, the armillary sphere at its peak, gleaming with a cold, metallic luster under the sunlight. Made it through? No. This was just another, much grander, much more exquisite cage. I didn't rush to take any action. Instead, I spent half a day gathering every single ancient text in the observatory. Everything covering feng shui, formations, and astrology, and read through them all. All this new knowledge cross-referenced perfectly with the metaphysical systems already in my head, giving me a much deeper understanding of how energy actually flowed through this royal palace. At the same time, I was searching for a way to completely purge the radiation from my body, or at least find a permanent substitute for the ceiling magnetic field. I took the department's little building. I quietly rearranged everything according to the 9 palaces flying stars formation. I shifted the stone lions at the door by 3 inches, and swapped the potted plants by the window for energy-gathering evergreens. I positioned my desk in the scholar's corner, and set my bed by the gate of life. I transformed the energy of the entire building into an impenetrable defensive array. Not only does it nourish my body, but it also silently wards off any prying eyes and hidden malice from the outside. Next, I began reviewing the files of the 99 transmigrated women. These records were kept sealed in the secret vault of the Imperial Observatory. They documented everything from their first appearance to their eventual deaths, right down to the very last detail, every poem they contributed, every novel gadget they crafted, every new technique they refined and introduced, and ultimately, their causes of death. Looking at those rows of familiar modern concepts, glassblowing, gunpowder refinement, the curved shaft plow, and high-yield crops, I felt a complex wave of emotions. Every single one of them was once a proud, favored child of destiny. They all harbored sweet dreams of changing the world and winning the Emperor's heart, only to end up as nothing more than a cold, lifeless file. A tool, casually discarded once its value had been bled dry. I categorized and analyzed their cases. Some died from shining too brightly and drawing unwanted attention, while others died from foolish naivety. But at the end of the day, they all died because they knew absolutely nothing about the ruthless, calculating mind of an emperor. They serve as my warning, and as the ultimate textbook for my next steps. The very next day, the new transmigrator arrived right on schedule. The palace was currently in the Imperial Garden, hosting a small flower viewing banquet. As the newly appointed head of the Anomalies Bureau, I was also summoned to attend. I just stood quietly in a far corner, observing everyone at the gathering. The Emperor sat high up in the pavilion, lazily watching his concubines compete for his attention. Suddenly, his eyes flickered, and he shot a deeply meaningful glance in my direction. I immediately understood. Following his line of sight, I spotted a young girl in the crowd, dressed in a pale yellow palace gown. She stood out entirely from the rest. Unlike the other reserved and bashful candidates, her bright, lively eyes darted everywhere, her face brimming with curiosity and sheer excitement for this new world. The moment she laid eyes on the Emperor, a fierce, determined gleam of absolute conquest flashed in her eyes. I was almost entirely certain she was number 101. She carried a certain aura that felt completely out of place in this era. A vibrant, unruly energy. It was a vibe I had seen in countless of my fellow transmigrators before. Sure enough, when it came time for the talent showcase, she blew everyone away. Holding a hastily modified lute, she began to play using a completely bizarre, yet incredibly rhythmic style, and belted out a song that was incredibly familiar to me. It was a modern pop song with lyrics that were bold and unabashedly direct. The tune was upbeat and wildly catchy, instantly plunging the entire Imperial Garden into a bizarre, dead silence. The concubines stared in absolute shock. A faint, almost imperceptible smirk played on the Emperor's lips as he lightly tapped his fingers against the jade table. His eyes never once left the girl, as if he were watching a highly entertaining stage play. Keeping my face completely blank, I pulled out my special charcoal pencil and quickly jotted down a few lines in my notebook. Lu Qingqing, age 20. Suspected to be anomaly number 101. Personality traits: lively and extroverted. High desire for attention, absolutely zero sense of reverence or fear. Skill set: arts and entertainment. Initial risk assessment: low. Recommended action: observation. After the banquet wrapped up, the Emperor's head eunuch came over to deliver a verbal decree. He told me the newcomer was now in my hands. Carrying a palace lantern, I made my way to the side hall of the Zhaohui Palace, where Lu Qingqing had been assigned to live. She had already been granted the title of Talented Lady. Though the rank wasn't particularly high for a newcomer, it was basically an overnight rise to the heavens. When I arrived, she was busy bossing around the maids and eunuchs, turning the hall's furnishings completely upside down. Her bossy attitude looked exactly like those fresh-faced interns who think the whole world revolves around them. Seeing me, she just gave a sideways glance, then asked who I was. I told her I was the head of the Anomaly Bureau, ordered by His Majesty to come and teach her the palace rules. Lu Qingqing froze for a second, then, as if suddenly realizing something, she dismissed the servants and crept up to me all mysteriously. Lowering her voice, she asked if I was a time traveler too. As she spoke, she flashed me a peace sign. I lowered my eyes, pretending I didn't understand. She waved her hand a bit impatiently. She said her system had already notified her, saying there was a senior transmigrator in the palace and that we were on the same team. Her mission was to win the emperor's heart and become empress. I scoffed inwardly. My lady, you can eat whatever you want, but you absolutely cannot just say whatever you please. In this palace, loose lips invite disaster. Since you are completely new here, you'd better learn the rules first so you can serve His Majesty properly. Lu Qingqing curled her lip in utter disdain, saying there was no point in learning such feudal garbage. She claimed that modern women value independence, confidence, and charisma. She was going to use her talent and uniqueness to make the emperor fall in love with her instead of acting like a groveling slave like me. She spoke with such fiery passion as if she could already picture herself ruling the world as the empress. I didn't bother arguing with her. I simply pulled a rule book quietly from my sleeve and placed it right in front of her. These are the palace rules. Please memorize them well, my lady. I will come to check tomorrow. If there are any mistakes, you will be punished according to the rules. Lu Qingqing's eyes shot wide open as she scoffed. Who dares to punish me? His Majesty, of course. My lady, you are a master personally titled by His Majesty. I would never dare disrespect you, but I still want to give you a little reminder. The one thing this palace never lacks is unique women. Over at the mass grave out back, I have personally buried 99 of them, and every single one of them thought she was the chosen one, completely one of a kind. Hearing my words, a hint of sheer terror and confusion crept onto Lu Qingqing's face. I said no more, gave a polite bow, and turned to leave the side hall. I knew perfectly well that when dealing with greenhouse flowers like her, pure intimidation works much better than preaching. I had already given her the clearest warning possible. As for whether she actually listens or not, well, that's completely out of my hands. I compiled my meeting with Lu Qingqing into a written report, word for word, and presented it onto the emperor's desk. He read it incredibly carefully, even reading over those bold, modern declarations of hers I had recorded, twice. After reading it, he made no comment. He simply raised his eyes to look at me and asked, "How long do you think she'll live?" To answer, Your Majesty, that depends entirely on her luck. And more importantly, it depends on how much use she still has for Your Majesty. This sentence was both an assessment of Lu Qingqing and a subtle reminder to the emperor of my own value. The corners of the emperor's lips curled up into a highly satisfied smile. He loved this kind of smart, well-measured conversation. In the days that followed, Lu Qingqing indeed behaved much better. She started studying the palace rules seriously. Even though she was still clumsy and making endless mistakes, at least her attitude was proper now. The emperor would occasionally summon her, listening to her sing those bizarre new songs, or tell a few modern jokes. But a monarch's affection always stopped at a superficial level of mere amusement. And as for me, utilizing my position as the head of the Anomaly Bureau, I started laying out my plans in the shadows. Under the guise of surveying the royal palace's feng shui, I walked through every single corner of the palace, mapping out the energy nodes of the entire Forbidden City, and locking them firmly into my memory. I discovered that the absolute center of the palace's dragon vein was right at the Qilin Pavilion. That is to say, the exact place where the seal was kept. Meanwhile, Lu Qingqing's patience was clearly running dry. Her system seemed to be constantly rushing her to finish her mission. Her behavior started becoming increasingly reckless. She began dropping subtle hints, trying to fish out the seal's location from the emperor. She even tried using her pathetic little bit of modern knowledge to improve the recipes in the imperial kitchens. Predictably, she just churned out a pile of absolute garbage food, which thoroughly disgusted the emperor. I took all of her idiotic antics and coldly documented them, submitting regular reports. In my written accounts, Lu Qingqing was painted as an ambitious but incompetent fool, desperate for quick success, and utterly useless. Finally, on one rainy night, she made a fatal mistake. That night, taking advantage of the guard's shift change, Lu Qingqing snuck right outside the Qilin Pavilion. She just couldn't wait any longer. She was recklessly desperate to get close to the seal, but I had already learned of her little plan well in advance through my spies. I didn't try to stop her, nor did I report her. I just waited quietly behind a rockery not too far away, watching her charge straight toward the very hall that would spell her absolute doom. The guards at the Qilin Pavilion were the emperor's most elite royal troops. Her pathetic, amateur sneaking skills were nothing but a joke to them. The second she got close, she was taken down on the spot. By the time the Royal Guard commander's interrogation report and my daily observation logs were laid out together in front of the Emperor, her fate was already sealed. Inside the royal study, the Emperor's voice gave away zero emotion. He asked me, since Lu Qingqing dared to covet the Phoenix Seal and scheme for the divine artifact, what should be her punishment? I knelt on the floor and answered with a perfectly steady voice, according to palace rules, death. As I spat out that last word, I didn't feel a single ounce of hesitation. Pity and sympathy are the cheapest, yet deadliest emotions in this palace. If I wanted to survive, I had to be colder than everyone else. The Emperor stared at me in total silence for a long time, and then, he suddenly laughed. He waved his hand, ordering me to handle the execution. He told me I had done exceptionally well. He said he needed someone as ruthless and efficient as me by his side. I bowed deeply, pressing my face right into the freezing cold golden floor tiles. That very night, I watched with my own eyes as Lu Qingqing was dragged out into the courtyard of the Discipline Bureau. Then, right before the execution began, I turned my back and walked away. Back at the Bureau of Anomalies, I archived Lu Qingqing's case file, and under the cause of death section, I simply wrote one word, stupidity. Then, I pulled out the feng shui array map of the palace that I had drawn up ages ago. Right on the spot marking the Qilin Pavilion, I gently tapped a single red dot. The time was almost ripe. I never had any intention of surviving just based on some king's fleeting whims. What I wanted was to completely flip this helpless situation, and snatch my destiny right back into my own two hands. And that Phoenix Seal was going to be the absolute most critical piece of my entire master plan. Meanwhile, Consort Zhao, who had been keeping a low profile to protect her pregnancy, found out that I was also a transmigrator. She marched right over with her pregnant belly to pick a fight with me, screaming that I was a cheap homewrecker. How dare I sleep my way into the Emperor's bed while she was pregnant? But the more furiously she glared at me, the more I just sighed in absolute pity. The Emperor wanted her dead, but I actually wanted to save her life. After trapping the Imperial Astrologer in my array for over 10 days, he finally dropped dead, but I still hadn't figured out his method for transmigration. The only thing I looted from his corpse was a Bagua bronze mirror. Whenever the sunlight hit it, I carried the glowing 8 trigrams mirror, but I still couldn't figure out its secret. Given my special status now, everyone around me treated me with the utmost respect. The Emperor wanted to grant me an official title, but I purposely turned it down. Consort Zhao seemed to find a twisted sense of superiority in that, and she started mocking me relentlessly. Sicken, you're nothing more than a glorified head maid in the council chamber. No matter how high you climb, you'll never outrank the chief eunuch. Who the hell do you think you are? I said absolutely nothing in response to her provocation. I just stared at the blazing sun on the horizon, so glaringly bright it blinded the eyes. The Emperor was standing in the sunlight, his shadow casting very short behind him. Suddenly, a vital detail about the 8 trigrams mirror clicked in my mind, and I hurried away. The last time I scouted the area, I noticed the feng shui of the palace had shifted. Following the sun's trajectory now, I finally tracked down the National Preceptor's time travel point. It was an old dry well. When the fierce midday sun shined straight into it, the 8 trigrams mirror would activate. Down at the bottom of the well, I found the Preceptor's ID card and a laptop. I looked at the computer screen, and right there was the countdown program set for my system. So the National Preceptor was actually a programmer. He had discovered a bug in the space-time tunnel. But because of the universe's strict surveillance, he couldn't stay here for too long. If he exceeded the time limit, he'd be wiped out of existence. All those time-traveling girls who came before me were just female leads brought in to fix the world's storyline. And because the Preceptor had modified the code, the story would always spark a rebellion right when it was about to collapse. The current Emperor was actually the true male lead's younger brother. The real male lead had been trapped in the exiled lands by the Preceptor. After carefully reading through the files, I finally got the answers to so many things that hadn't made sense. After climbing out of the dry well, I didn't hand the laptop over to the Emperor. Instead, I told him, "Your Majesty, I've found the path the Preceptor uses to travel between worlds." I was only 1% away from getting my wish reward. The Emperor wanted to fill in the dry well, but I desperately wanted him to travel to the modern world himself. "Your Majesty, if you take enough wealth over there, you can buy even more terrifying weapons. Once you do, you can unite the entire world and achieve your ultimate grand ambition. Wouldn't that be incredible? Based on my research, someone has tampered with the 8 trigrams mirror. It only allows men to time travel. If the other royal princes find out about this..." The Emperor raised his hand, and I immediately dropped to my knees. My body's conditioned reflex had truly turned me into a submissive slave of this feudal society. My knees may have hit the ground, but my heart had never surrendered. "Oh, Emperor, heavy weapons from modern technology, are you tempted yet?" 3 days flew by in the blink of an eye for me. But for the Emperor, it felt like an eternity. In the end, he just couldn't resist the temptation. He stood at the edge of the dry well, loaded down with gold and jade artifacts. And all kinds of priceless treasures. I watched with my own eyes as he held the 8 trigrams mirror, shining it into the bottom of the well. He opened the space-time tunnel, and jumped right in. The space-time tunnel vanished the moment the Emperor left. By the time Consort Zhao rushed over, it was already too late. She screamed at me, asking if I was out of my damn mind. With the Emperor gone to the modern world, what was she supposed to do now? But at that exact moment, the real male lead returned to the palace. It was my very first time meeting him, but it felt like we had known each other for lifetimes. My system panel suddenly shifted. The monarch's affection rate was still at 99%, but the target name had changed to the true male lead, Wang Yu. Yuqing Palace and the Jade King. Everything in this world leaves a trace. The Emperor ordered his men to take Consort Zhao away, and declared me his empress right then and there. I smiled and accepted, then asked the new Emperor to entrust the Phoenix Seal to my care. The moment my fingers touched the Phoenix Seal, I felt the raw power of its magnetic field, along with the crushing weight of absolute power. I haven't walked the path to the cold palace in months. Consort Zhao was locked up here, heavily pregnant. Are you here to gloat? She spat. Little Six had been taking good care of her, she could go into labor any day now. But the sight of my empress robes clearly stung her eyes. Seeing her red, teary eyes, and her face covered in tears, I said with feigned pity. Do you know why I used to make you kneel by the Phoenix Seal every so often? I just wanted you to cry a little more, hoping you'd finally cry all the delusion out of your head. I told her the former emperor was never coming back. He knows nothing about feng shui, he'll never find the true path of the sun. So he will be trapped forever in our modern, equal world. An arrogant, self-serving man like him, wandering the modern world with no ID, carrying all that gold and jewelry. Just thinking about it is absolutely hilarious. I told her the former emperor was nothing but a scumbag. Why shed so many tears for a man like that? She was blinded by his handsome face and royal status, completely forgetting her own worth. You're going to give birth soon. This is the late emperor's child. I assume. I don't need to teach you what to do next, right? When the emperor disappeared, the new emperor needed a legitimate claim to the throne, so naturally, we couldn't call it a rebellion. That's why I kept her alive. She just stared at me, dumbfounded, as if it finally clicked. Have you forgotten where we came from? A world of gender equality, of social progress. This patriarchal era where women are treated like dirt, it's up to us to change it. That is our true purpose after time traveling. Less than 20% of the maids in this palace can even read. They do it to keep them obedient, to brainwash women into pure ignorance. You're so capable, why throw it all away and weep for a man who murdered 99 other modern girls? I sat back in the seat of honor, and had little Six help her sit up. I recounted every single death, from the very first time traveler, all the way to the 100th. Especially when I mentioned Lu Qingqing, who was beaten to death. My hands instinctively clenched into fists. Don't worry, Your Grace. Everything is taken care of. Little Six is now my head eunuch, and he's become so much more reliable and composed. I gently patted his shoulder, thanking him for delivering that crucial letter to the new emperor back then. Bringing His Majesty back from exile. Watching him bow his head so humbly. I couldn't help but think, this era is just too far removed from the world I left behind. I have to climb to the very top, it's the only way to survive. On the night of our royal wedding, the emperor lifted my bridal veil. The system flashed, Emperor's affection, 100%. I could finally redeem a wish. The emperor pulled me into his arms, his eyes filled with such tender love. He asked me what my greatest wish was. Smiling, I gently stroked his face, while silently wishing to the system for eternal youth and immortality. The emperor's gentle expression instantly froze, clearly shocked by my choice. Your Majesty can see the holographic screen in front of me, can't you? The emperor knitted his brows tightly, pointing directly at my face, and furiously demanded to know why I didn't wish for a lifetime of true love with him. I burst into laughter, loud, wild, and completely unhinged. Your Majesty, why do you think I traveled thousands of miles to that wretched exile land? To deliver a letter to you? What do you think was my real reason for helping you? You were nothing but a stepping stone for my rise to power. That ridiculous illusion of love? I had never even met the man before all this. Where would love even come from? Furious, the emperor raised his sword and lunged right at me. I dodged to the side, and he instantly became trapped in my endless illusion maze. He screamed in helpless rage, while I tortured him into writing the Edict of Abdication. Just then, Xiao Luji rushed in a total panic. He said Consort Zhao had gone into a difficult labor. I hurried over to her palace. How could this happen? Weren't all the checkups perfectly fine before? I demanded. My pelvis is just too small, she gasped. The baby's head is too big, and it's in the wrong position. It was a brutal breech birth. Consort Zhao tried desperately to suppress Her agonized screams during the contractions. She gritted her teeth and gripped my hand for dear life. The midwife's voice grew more and more frantic in my ear. She begged me to make a choice, save the mother or save the child. Save the mother, I yelled, but Consort Zhao cried out, save my baby. I was completely stunned by her choice. Are you insane? You're throwing your life away, for some man's child? She suddenly let go of my hand, her face turning deathly pale. With tears pooling in her eyes, she gritted her teeth to endure the next agonizing wave of contractions. She made me promise to raise her child well, swearing that her family would become my strongest allies in the future. In the end, she used every last ounce of her strength to give birth to a little girl. With her dying breath, she named her Jing Ruo, and that was the very first time I learned. Her real name from the modern world was Wen Shu Jing. I just stood there, staring at her, my entire body running ice cold. The floor was covered in blood, but this time I swore it would be different. She wouldn't be dragged off and quietly buried in some forgotten consort's tomb. I made her the late emperor's one and only empress. Her massive coffin was carried out through the grand ceremonial gates, with all the royal officials weeping in mourning. I ordered the entire nation into mourning for 3 months. Holding the peacefully sleeping baby in my arms, I chose the most powerful dragon vein in this world for Wen Shu Jing's resting place. Whoever said a woman couldn't be buried on a dragon vein? I was going to make a woman the absolute master of this empire. After I finished handling the funeral arrangements, I opened the laptop left behind by the Grand Preceptor, only to find the battery was almost completely dead. That meant I only had a limited amount of time to use it. So, I changed the rules. I turned the current emperor into a system-bound task conqueror. I had starved him until he was barely clinging to life. When he saw the glowing system panel appear before him, his eyes filled with absolute despair. Well, are you satisfied with the little system Quest 1 designed just for your royal bloodline? My time at the Bureau of Anomalies wasn't wasted. After digging through countless ancient records, I finally discovered the horrifying truth. For generations, the past emperors had been using the system to exploit the knowledge and abilities of transmigrated women. They just happened to run into an absolute genius like the Grand Preceptor, who managed to expose the royal family's darkest secrets. And this emperor right in front of me was just as guilty. Did you really think that just by making me your empress, I would be utterly devoted to you? I sneered, mocking his arrogance. He knew absolutely nothing about the agonizing pain I endured during my 3 years in this hellish palace. I suffered for 1,543 grueling days and nights. My heart turned to pure ice a long time ago. I then looked down at the emperor and told him he was free to go. But, if you don't obey the system, you will be brutally punished. With that, the laptop finally ran out of battery. It went black, becoming nothing more than a piece of scrap metal. And my system rules were locked in forever, unless another person like the royal advisor comes along and finds a loophole. Otherwise, the feng shui array I've set up across the nation is more than enough to keep this world completely under my control. Before I became emperor, I was Prince Heng. My older brother was the absolute, dead certain heir to the throne. When I was 20, I fell for a girl in strange clothes who literally dropped out of the sky. She fell right into my arms, wearing this playful little smile, and immediately called me handsome. It was only later that I learned she was a goddess bestowed by the heavens, the future empress, but since I was nowhere near the line of succession, I couldn't have her. My brother didn't even love her as much as I did. He would constantly misunderstand and torment her over some other noblewoman. When I held a bouquet of gardenias and walked up to her, heart pounding, I clearly saw her furrow her brows. She told me she was sorry, that she only saw me as a brother. The moment she turned and walked away without looking back, a man dressed in equally strange clothes stepped out from behind me. He was wearing dark glasses, so I couldn't see the look in his eyes. But judging by the smirk on his face as he stepped out from behind the rockery, I knew he'd watched the whole pathetic scene. Where we're from, a guy like you is called a simp. And a simp will always end up with absolutely nothing. I ordered my guards to seize him, but the man claimed he could help me. He said he came from the exact same place as the goddess. He called our reality a small world created by some sort of system. He said he was a senior programmer, and that he could hack into the back end of this system and hijack it to serve me. I questioned his motives, naturally, but he just laughed and said he was doing it out of pure boredom. To him, us ancient people were nothing more than NPCs in a little video game. I didn't understand half of what he said, but my burning desire for the goddess meant I had no choice but to trust him. After he vanished, the relationship between the goddess and my brother hit a crisis. She threw herself into my arms, begging me to take her away. But at the crucial moment, she turned right back to my brother's embrace, crying about how I was such a good guy and how she couldn't bear to hurt me, while constantly wavering between me and him. Did she think I wasn't powerful enough? Then, that man returned. He told me that as long as I could get my brother exiled, the goddess would be mine. So, I exploited the jealousy between her and my brother's noblewomen. It worked perfectly. My brother was banished. When she found out I was the mastermind behind it all, she looked at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. But the man just smiled and said, "Don't worry. She'll be on her knees begging you soon enough." Soon after, I ascended the throne as emperor. A transparent panel materialized right in front of my eyes. It displayed every time-traveling girl who approached me, complete with a countdown timer and an affection meter. He told me, "I can't alter the core code for the affection meter just yet. But I've tweaked the rules of their little dating game. If these women don't do absolutely everything in their power to please you within 99 days, their blood will freeze and they will die." He referred to all these women collectively as time travelers. And just as he predicted, the goddess I had loved so much began to grovel, offering her entire being to me. But after having my way with her, I suddenly found her incredibly boring. It turned out, I only ever loved the thrill of the hunt. She demanded I make her my empress. But a woman who had already slept with my brother? I had absolutely no desire to make her my official wife. She even tried to lecture me about monogamy to piss me off, then threw herself into a lake, trying to make me regret it. I am the emperor, the absolute ruler of the world. After I dragged her dead body out of the water, yet another goddess conveniently appeared by my side. They act so innocent, but every single one of them is only after one thing. The Empress's seal. I appointed that man as my royal advisor, but I completely underestimated the ambitions of a rabid dog. With the system in his hands, he basically controlled the very rules of this world. The time-traveling women who were supposed to serve me, all became his little playthings. My dignity as a man was trampled on. I had no choice but to squeeze every last drop of talent out of those women. And then, I eliminated them before they could get pregnant, ending the threat once and for all. Because the advisor could only cross over for brief periods. So, we played a deadly game in the shadows. I knew he wanted to steal my throne. He wanted to make a time-traveling woman bear his child, so that by relying on the power of his bloodline, he could stay in this world permanently. I had to find a way to get rid of this bastard. Just as I was losing my mind with anxiety, a hidden time traveler finally revealed herself. Sikken, who had been laying low in the cold palace for 3 years, actually turned out to be a very useful pawn. She could see the system panel. Now that made things a whole lot more interesting. Maybe this was why the system was glitching out with more and more bugs after its settings were tampered with. I wanted to pit the two time-traveling women against each other for my favor, but suddenly, the transparent panel vanished from my sight. The advisor said this was my punishment for being disobedient. And it was exactly this punishment that made me blind to Sikken's true colors. After she helped me get rid of the advisor, she sent me to their so-called modern world. The Bagua mirror in my hand looked completely ordinary. No matter how desperately I chased the sun, I couldn't go back. Sikken said this portal had been modified. It only allowed men to pass through, specifically to prevent the time-traveling women from escaping. Carrying my gold and jewels, I wandered aimlessly through those strange streets. All I wanted was to buy weapons and technology to take back with me. But the people here looked at me like I was a madman. They had people in blue uniforms lock me up, and all my wealth was stripped from me. They even accused me of being a grave robber. Damn it, I am the emperor. I absolutely refused to swallow this insult. But, I had no ID, no background. I was locked away in a cramped cell, year after agonizing year. It wasn't until I fell terminally ill that they finally sent me to a hospital. The person next to me was swiping through short dramas on their phone. Suddenly, I heard a name I knew all too well. Sikken. In that ridiculous drama, my brother was actively trying to win her heart. The girl next to me was completely engrossed in it. I grabbed her hand in an absolute frenzy. I need to get in there. I have to get inside this screen. The girl looked at me like I was insane. And when she heard me call Sikken a bitch, she just laughed in my face. She said the core of this drama is like chocolate. Humans can eat it just fine. But if a dog eats it... She didn't finish her sentence, she just turned around and walked away faster. Only later did I find out, chocolate is poisonous to dogs. Damn it all, men are the masters. Are the women of this era trying to turn the entire natural order upside down? The doctors of this world told me with grave faces that I had lymphatic cancer. The cancer cells had already spread to every organ in my body. Even with all their medical treatments, there was no cure. I could only watch helplessly as my life slipped away, bit by bit. Right before the end, a hospice volunteer softly asked me if I had any final wishes and said they would do their best to fulfill them. I stared out the window at that unfamiliar sky and told them I just wanted to watch that short drama. Because what played on that screen was my home, the homeland I could never return to. The volunteer probably took pity on me. They would often sit by my bed and chat with me, rambling on about how fast this world was changing, talking about all these bizarre new things I had never even heard of. Listening to all that meaningless chatter, my heart was drowning in pure, bitter resentment. My eyes were glued to the short drama on the phone. I watched Sikken slowly, ruthlessly torment my brother to death. I watched as she took the daughter of that bastard advisor, and ascended the throne that rightfully belonged to me. But she refused to take the Empress's throne for herself, choosing instead to hide in the shadows, calculating her every move. She manipulated everything, personally raising that child to become a worthy Empress. Until she turned 23. That was the year Sikken stood before countless subjects, and staged a miraculous ascension to the heavens in broad daylight. From then on, she became the kingdom's absolute, supreme deity. I hate this so much. I really just want to go home. Back to my very own dynasty. I was crowned the crown princess ever since I was a little girl. But as I grew older, I realized something terrifying. My grandmother wasn't aging at all. Meanwhile, my imperial grandfather grew more and more frail, withering away like a piece of dead, weathered wood. He was barely holding on. I stayed closely by my imperial grandmother's side, learning how to review the state memorials. Her gaze was always so incredibly stern. She was exceptionally harsh with me, especially when I fell for that handsome young boy from the general's family. My grandmother looked at me with such icy coldness, but in the end, she knelt down beside me, and warned me not to give my heart away so easily. She said that a betrayed heart hurts more than anything else. I didn't understand it, but I didn't dare to disobey her either. I just thought to myself, the very first thing I'll do when I take the throne is banish my grandmother to the remote summer palace. But when I turned 25, after suffering through betrayal after betrayal, I suddenly realized that the only person still standing by my side was my imperial grandmother. My grandmother was immortal. She finally told me the truth about where she came from. But the patriarchy in this world was so deeply rooted, it couldn't be torn down overnight. All she ever wanted was a new era, an era of true peace, equality, and fairness. She said it would take a united front to make it happen. But because of the era's limitations, she told me I had to learn how to endure. Then, I watched her walk out of the palace gates. She would only come back once every few years. I worried myself sick until my hair turned gray. Yet she remained as youthful as ever. And then, women were finally allowed to work. They were allowed to go to school. They even rolled out a brand new marriage law, enforcing strict monogamy. You even had to pass an exam just to have kids. Otherwise, they wouldn't even issue you a birth permit.